Hi everyone and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome. And if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we are doing one of our quick builds where we'll be exploring a briefly summarized character build for Dungeons & Dragons. And as always with our quick builds, if there's ever a build you'd like to see me explore in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Today's request comes from Bard Dan 7203, who asked about merging two classes together, Warlock and Artificer, focused specifically on dual wielding the Warlock's Pact weapon and the Arcane Firearm. Now before we get too far into this request, I will say that I did do a Spellshot / Arcane Gunslinger character about a year ago now, and that build still technically holds up, but I wanted to redo it since this request does say that it's meant to combine Warlock with Artificer to become a full dual wielding Arcane Gunslinger. But more than that, I actually want to do this build with 2024 rules. I am breaking my own rule a little bit where I was going to ask, and if I didn't hear back, I was going to go with 2014 rules since that's when the build was requested. But honestly, looking at the 2024 rules and seeing everything that Warlock gets, and the fact that Artificer is backwards compatible, and since we did already do a spell shot from the 2014 rules, I think 2024 fits perfectly, and we can do some really fun stuff with this build in mind. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into the build. Starting with our origin and character creation, for our species, for this one, we're going to be an elf, and specifically a high elf. There's one feature we want that we're not going to get to level 5, but it will pay off later on in the build. As far as backgrounds in the 2024 Player's Handbook go, I would recommend Merchant, because it's going to let us increase our charisma and our intelligence, while also getting us the lucky feat, which can be pretty good since I would say gunslingers are usually themed to be lucky to some extent. However, gunslingers are also usually themed to have quick reflexes and be quick on the draw. For that, I would take the alert feat, which you could pick up by going with any old background from a previous book, picking up alert as your origin feat, and then you can also increase any ability scores that you'd like, so you can increase charisma by 2 and intelligence by 1, which is what we're doing here. For those stats, we want the following array, and it is a little weird, but believe me, it does work out to some extent. We want to leave strength alone at 8. We're going to put 5 points into dexterity, making it 13. We're going to put 4 points into constitution, getting us 12 constitution, so we are pretty frail. We're going to put 9 points into intelligence and our +1 to get us 16 intelligence. We're going to leave wisdom alone as well at 8 because we just don't have enough points to spend to increase it. And then we're going to put 9 points into charisma again and increase that by 2 to get us 17. Looking at the level breakdown now, we're going to go tier by tier for this build, and there's a lot of specific things we need if we actually want to be able to dual wield an Arcane Firearm with a Pact weapon. For starters, we have to start as an Artificer and go up to Artificer 2. Our stats are not really built for us to actually be in combat as an Artificer, so we're probably focusing more on utility and support for right now. What's important is that we get our infusions and we pick Repeating Shot. Once we have that, we want to apply it to a pistol that we've picked up. Because pistols are part of the 2024 PHB full stop, I would assume that this is fair to get, unless your DM says otherwise, but if your DM did say otherwise, I don't know why you'd still be trying to play an Arcane Gunslinger if they don't like guns. Assuming that we get our hands on a pistol, with Repeating Shot, we now have an actual pistol to use. And once we have that magical pistol, we can then go Warlock 1 to pick up the Pact of the Blade invocation, and we can make any magic item our Pact weapon, not just a melee weapon. So we can bond with the infused pistol to now use charisma for those shots instead of dexterity like it was before. I would flavor our infusion of Repeating Shot into the weapon as us turning it from a flintlock pistol to like a 6-shooter, maybe an early version of one, and that would just be kind of fun flavoring for it. After Warlock 1, we're going to go Warlock 2 to get 2 more invocations. Those invocations are going to be Pact of the Tome and Agonizing Blast. Pact of the Tome we can pick up because the pacts are now all invocations and are not mutually exclusive. We want this to pick up 3 cantrips that will probably have to come from the wizard spell list, but the important thing is that they also appear on the artificer spell list. I would recommend cantrips like Firebolt, Ray of Frost, and Acid Splash. Those three will now function as warlock spells for us, meaning that we can apply Agonizing Blast to one of them. We're going to want to use these instead of picking up like Eldritch Blast and pairing Agonizing Blast with it, just for the flavor of the character, which I will definitely talk about a lot more later. But for right now, just grab 3 damage-dealing cantrips, preferably ranged ones, that appear on the Artificer spell list, and we probably pick up through the Wizard spell list. After that, we go back to Artificer 3 to actually become an Artillerist. We don't get Arcane Firearm yet, but we do get our Eldritch Cannon. Our Eldritch Cannon could be a bonus action to deal damage with the Force Ballista, shoot a flamethrower with the flamethrower, or it could give us temporary hit points with the shield generator. Tier 2, we're going to go up 2 more levels into Artificer to actually get our Arcane Firearm. So now we have a wand that is turned into an Arcane Firearm, as well as an actual magical Pact-bound pistol. So we can dual wield, we just can't actually dual wield by using both these weapons on the same turn. We're also going to gain a feat, and for this first feat I would take either Spell Sniper to improve our charisma by +1 and be able to cast attack spells at extended range and in melee, or take Sharpshooter to do essentially the same thing by improving our dex +1, allowing us to ignore cover with our gun and shoot in melee with it. Either one is a good feat choice, and we're going to get the other one later on anyways. Now for the other 3 levels at this tier, this is where it becomes a little odd, but we are going to start working our way to actually being able to dual wield legitimately on the same turn. We're not going to be able to do it really quickly. It just is impossible with the level breakdown of the build no matter how we do it, but it is possible. If you want to get it a little bit quicker, you'd have to go Bard and go Valor Bard. But for this build, I'm going to say we go Fighter and go Eldritch Knight because we want the War Magic feature. Going up to Fighter 3 is going to get us Weapon Mastery, so we can now Vex with our pistol, finally. We can also pick up Second Wind, the Archery Fighting Style, and Action Surge, which are all going to be very helpful for survivability and dealing damage. In Tier 3, finally at level 14, we will have War Magic. I'm going to skip over the feats that we would get on our way here, as well as Extra Attack, though we now have Extra Attack, and just talk about War Magic in its entirety for this build, because it is the crux that allows us to dual wield with our Arcane Firearm and our Pact pistol. The Eldritch Knight's War Magic feature says that when we take the attack action on our turn, we can replace one of our attacks of one of our wizard cantrips that has the casting time of 1 action. This is where it's important to define what is a wizard cantrip versus a warlock cantrip versus an artificer cantrip. We kind of touched on it before when we had Pact of the Tome, because we picked up other cantrips from other classes' spells and made them warlock cantrips thanks to Pact of the Tome. And that really is the only definition of what a class's cantrip is. As long as it appears on that class's spell list, it counts as a cantrip for that class. Now, maybe your DM will be a little bit more of a stickler and say, well, as a wizard cantrip, in order to do it, you have to use intelligence. Luckily, our intelligence is okay, but ideally, we'll be able to cast the spells we picked up from the other spell lists as charisma-based spells. And the reason it's important is because when we replace one of these attacks with a wizard cantrip, let's say Firebolt, because that appears on the wizard spell list, it is also an artificer cantrip, because it appears on the artificer spell list. That means that if we cast it through our Arcane Firearm, it counts as an artificer spell and gets the extra d8 of damage onto its d10s of fire damage. In addition, it counts as a warlock cantrip for us because we took it with Pact of the Tome, and that means we could also apply Agonizing Blast to it. So all of a sudden it's doing the d10s from our level, it's doing a d8 from Arcane Firearm, and it's doing our charisma modifier in damage all in one. And on top of that, we could shoot with a pistol first, maybe using Lucky to give ourselves advantage on that attack, then Vex the target that we have attacked, replace our second attack with a shot of this Firebolt spell from our Arcane Firearm, and have advantage on that attack thanks to the Vex Weapon Mastery. we have now actually dual wielded in our two different firearm-based weapons. What becomes really interesting is when you start swapping out the cantrip that you're using instead of just Firebolt for things like Ray of Frost, Acid Splash, even Poison Spray, which already appears on all three of these classes' spell lists without actually requiring us to use Pact of the Tome. Basically, in my mind, these are just using different elemental bullets with our Arcane Firearm after we have our regular bullets from our Pact Firearm. It takes us a while to get here. The absolute minimum way we can do this as a fighter is level 14. As a bard, it would be level 13, but we'd miss Action Surge, we'd miss the archery fighting style, and we'd miss weapon masteries, which are all unfortunate. Action Surge is the last thing to mention. Action Surge now says that we can no longer take the magic action when we use our Action Surge action that we get for free. But what we can do is take the attack action and then replace one of those attacks yet again with another casting of a cantrip. Meaning, with Action Surge, after we can actually dual wield our Arcane Firearm and Pact weapon, we can Action Surge and do it all over again for another actual shot and a magical shot. Other than that, that's pretty much the build. It really doesn't come fully online to level 14 like I said, but once it does, it makes us feel like an actual Arcane Gunslinger dual wielding two different magical firearms, and legitimately dual wielding the Arcane Firearm and a Pact weapon, just like the request wanted. Honestly, this feels like it's really only possible in 2024, though it might be possible in 2014, but probably not to the same extent. And even though it might not be the most powerful combo we could do, since we could just be an Eldritch Blaster, for example, it still feels very thematic. It gets more thematic when you add in extra feats that you're going to be able to get from picking up more levels in Fighter or Warlock, and also picking your subclass. Personally, I would pick Fey Warlock, because we're going to gain bonuses to the Misty Step spell, as well as we can cast the Misty Step spell a couple times for free. And as a High Elf, we have an innate casting from our species for Misty Step, which also benefits from the Feylock's improvements to the Misty Step spell. I think it makes us feel like a Fey cowboy, a wanderer of the Feywild or other areas who, even though we started off as a merchant, has now decided to take up the life of a wandering cowboy to travel on adventures with their two big irons on each hip. There's not too much else to say. There are a few other various spells and things we could probably pick up, and we didn't really focus on actually spell casting because we wanted to dual wield the two types of pistols. So we're doing a lot more shooting and cantrip blasting than anything else, but that would mean that we could save a lot of our actual spell slots for out-of-combat utility or support-based spells, and that could be pretty interesting as well. Let me know what you thought of the build, or how you would go about creating an Arcane Gunslinger dual wielder that was specifically going to pick up both Artillerist's Arcane Firearm as well as a Pact weapon. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.